Clara Hensley, a homeless ex-nurse, gave her last coat to a shivering teen on a snowy Michigan night. She didn't know that a week later, a limousine would roll up with news that would turn her quiet act of kindness into a life-changing miracle. Hi everyone, welcome to Life Unveiled. Let's get started. Clara Hensley was a ghost in Maplewood, Michigan, a town where snow buried the past and rust clung to the present like a stubborn stain. Once, she'd been Nurse Clara at St. Jude's Hospital, 20 years of stitching wounds, delivering babies, easing pain with a steady hand and a softer voice. She'd grown up in this fading industrial sprawl, a scrappy kid who patched up her siblings with band-aids and dreamed of healing the world. But life unraveled fast. Layoffs slashed her job, a fire gutted her apartment, and a bureaucratic glitch swallowed her savings. At 55, she lived in a tent behind an old warehouse, its brick walls crumbling, its windows boarded up. Her nursing days were reduced to bandaging shelter folks with scavenged gauze and sharing whatever scraps she could scrounge. Locals called her Nurse Clara, the woman who never stopped giving, even when her own hands trembled from hunger. She kept her corner tidy, sleeping bag rolled tight, a broken broom sweeping the cracked pavement, a nurse's instinct to maintain order amid chaos. The corner store clerk, a gruff man named Eddie, would forget bags of stale bread or bruised apples by the dumpster, and Clara repaid him by unloading heavy delivery boxes under the flicker of street lights, her breath fogging in the cold. One freezing January night, the wind howled through Maplewood, rattling Clara's tarp like a war drum. She was huddled under a thin blanket, her breath clouding in the dim glow of a dying flashlight, when she heard footsteps crunching through the snow, uneven, desperate. Peering out, she saw a teenage girl by the road, maybe 16, shivering in a torn grey hoodie and sneakers with gaping holes, clutching a dead phone. Her face was ghostly pale, lips tinged blue, her body racked with shivers as she kicked at the snow in frustration, muttering curses under her breath. Clara's heart thudded, a nurse's reflex honed by years of spotting trouble. She'd seen hypothermia kill in the ER, the confusion, the trembling, the way it crept up fast and silent. "Hey, you okay?" she called, stepping into the biting cold, her boots sinking into the drifts. The girl flinched, her head snapping up, then softened at Clara's greying hair and gentle eyes peeking from a frayed knit cap. "My car broke down," the girl muttered, her voice cracking with cold and fear. "Phone's dead. I'm lost." Clara squinted down the road. A battered hatchback sat half buried in a snowbank, its hood propped open, steam curling into the icy air like a dying breath. "You're 3 miles from downtown," Clara said, her own breath fogging. "Too cold to walk that far like this. You'll freeze solid." The girl's name was Mia Torres. She'd taken the car, an old clunker borrowed from a friend, to escape a screaming match with her mum, aiming for her aunt's house in the next town over. But the engine sputtered out halfway, leaving her stranded. Her hands shook violently now, her breaths short and ragged, her eyes darting like a cornered animal's. Clara didn't hesitate. She ducked back into her tent, her fingers numb as she rummaged through her milk crate and pulled out her only coat, a faded green parka, patched at the elbows with duct tape, her lifeline against Michigan's brutal winters. She stepped out and draped it over Mia's shoulders, the fabric swallowing the girl's thin frame. "Take this," Clara said firmly, her voice steady despite the chill seeping into her bones. "Can't think straight when you're freezing. Nursing school drilled that into me." Mia's eyes widened, a flicker of protest sparking in them. "But what about you? You'll freeze out here." Clara forced a smile, her teeth chattering as the wind clawed at her thin sweater. "I've got a blanket. I'll manage. Let's get you to the gas station down the road. They've got a payphone." Mia hesitated, her gaze lingering on Clara's shivering form, then nodded, pulling the parka tight. They trudged through the snow, Clara leading the way, her sweater soaked, the wind slicing through her like a knife. Mia stumbled once, her sneakers slipping on ice, and Clara caught her arm, steadying her with a grip honed by years of lifting patients from gurneys. The gas station glowed ahead, a flickering neon sign spelling "Open" in cracked letters, a patch of heat in the storm. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and motor oil. Mia fumbled coins into the payphone, her fingers clumsy with cold, and dialed her aunt. "She's coming," she said, hanging up, her voice steadier now as she rubbed her hands together. They sat on a bench under the awning, the snow swirling outside like a living thing. Mia's stomach growled, loud and insistent, cutting through the hum of the heater. Clara dug into her pocket, pulled out a crumpled bag of saltine crackers, her only food until the soup kitchen opened tomorrow, and pressed it into Mia's hands. "Eat," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You're no good to anyone hungry." Mia stared at the crackers, then at Clara, her eyes glistening with something like awe. "This is all you've got, isn't it?" Clara straightened, pride flaring despite the chill creeping up her spine. "We share what we have. That's how I was raised." Mia ate slowly, each bite deliberate, as if honouring the gift. Headlights pierced the dark. A battered pickup truck pulled up, its engine rumbling. Mia's aunt, a stout woman with worried eyes, leaped out, wrapping Mia in a fierce hug. She turned to Clara, fishing a crumpled 20 from her coat pocket, but Clara waved it off. "Keep it," she said, her voice hoarse. "Just get her home safe." Mia turned back, throwing her arms around Clara, her cheek pressed against the damp sweater. "I won't forget this," she whispered, her voice thick before climbing in. Clara watched the truck vanish into the night, then shuffled back to her tent, her body numb, her sweater clinging wetly to her skin, but a quiet warmth blooming in her chest. The next few days blurred into routine. Clara helped a new shelter guy patch his sleeping bag with duct tape, swept her corner with that broken broom, traded nods with Eddie at the store when he left a bag of bruised apples. But a restlessness gnawed at her. She'd catch herself staring at Maplewood's downtown skyline, the faint glow of lights piercing the bare trees, wondering if Mia made it to her aunt's, if she was warm now. She shook it off, blaming the cold, but the feeling stuck like frost on glass. 7 days later, snow fell thick and silent, muffling Maplewood's usual hum of factory trucks and barking dogs. Clara sat by her tent, sipping weak tea from a cracked mug, the steam curling into the frigid air when a sleek purr broke the quiet, a sound too polished for this rundown town. She looked up, her breath catching as a black limousine rolled into the warehouse lot, its polished surface glinting like obsidian against the grey snow. Shopkeepers stepped onto sidewalks, wiping hands on aprons, kids pointed from frosted windows. Even the strays stopped scavenging to stare. Clara stood, her mug slipping to the ground, tea soaking into the snow, as the limo's door swung open. Mia stepped out first, bundled in a new navy coat, her face bright with a grin that lit up the gloom. Behind her came a woman in a tailored blazer, her heels clicking on the pavement, and a man in a crisp military uniform, medals glinting on his chest like stars. "Clara Hensley?" the woman called, striding forward with purpose. Clara nodded, her throat tight, wary of this strange intrusion. "I'm Laura Torres, Mia's aunt. This is Colonel James Reed." Mia rushed over, practically bouncing on her toes. "I told them everything. How you saved me that night." Laura's voice was warm but edged with authority, her eyes sharp with intent. Mia came home raving about the woman who gave her coat and food when she had nothing left. "I run Torres Health, a medical supply company. We dug into your story. Clara Hensley, RN, 20 years at St. Jude's, honoured for bravery during a flu outbreak that nearly shut this town down. Why didn't you tell her who you were?" Clara shrugged, her voice barely above a whisper, rough from the cold. "Didn't think it mattered anymore. I'm nobody now." Colonel Reed stepped forward, a folder in hand, his gaze steady and piercing. "You're wrong about that. I checked your records. You volunteered as a field nurse with the National Guard during a flood crisis, saved a dozen lives in one night, kept going when others dropped. Your pension got tangled in red tape after the hospital closed. Your license lapsed when you couldn't pay the fees. We fixed it. Back pay, new ID, everything's sorted." Laura smiled, a glint of excitement breaking through her professional veneer. "And we're launching Nurses Haven, a program to get homeless healthcare workers back on their feet. Housing, training, jobs. We want you to help run it. You've lived this life. You know what they need." Clara's broom clattered to the pavement, her hands shaking as tears spilled, hot against her cold cheeks. Mia grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. "You saved me," she said, her voice fierce. "Now it's our turn." The news hit Maplewood like a thunderclap. By evening, whispers buzzed through the streets. Nurse Clara, the homeless woman who'd given away her coat, was somebody again. Eddie at the corner store slapped a Clara's Fund jar on his counter, dropping in his own crumpled bills with a gruff, "She's earned it." The soup kitchen folks nailed a sign to a bench. "Nurse Clara's spot." The wood still smelling of fresh paint. Clara barely slept that night, replaying Laura's words, tracing the edges of her reinstated ID. Her name in crisp black letters, a lifeline pulled from the wreckage of her past. A week later, the warehouse lot hummed with life. A construction crew rolled in, their trucks kicking up snow as they broke ground on the first Nurses Haven shelter. A low brick building with wide windows, funded by Torres Health. Clara watched from the sidelines, bundled in a new coat Mia had brought her, the green parka now a relic hung on her tent pole like a flag of survival. Laura showed up with blueprints, her voice brisk as she pointed out details. Phase 1, housing for 20, a clinic, a training room. We need your input. Clara nodded, still half dazed, and spent the day sketching layouts. Where the beds should go, how to make the clinic feel safe, not sterile. That night, Laura handed her keys to a small apartment above the shelter, a single room with a creaky bed, a sink, a window overlooking the lot. Clara moved in, hanging the parka on the wall, its faded fabric a silent vow to remember where she'd been. The shelter opened 3 months later under a grey March sky, a quiet ceremony with a handful of onlookers. 15 nurses, ex-hospital, ex-military, moved in, their faces a mix of hope and wariness. Clara greeted each one, her voice steady now, offering bandages for old wounds, advice on navigating the system. She ran the outreach, teaching them to renew licenses, find jobs, reclaim their lives. Laura visited weekly, swapping her blazer for jeans as they planned a second shelter. They launched a scholarship in Clara's name, Hensley Hope, for kids of healthcare workers, and Mia, now a freshman studying nursing, was the first recipient. "You're why I'm here," Mia told her at the opening, her hug fierce and warm. One snowy night, a year later, Clara was driving the shelter's beat-up van back from a supply run, the highway stretching dark and quiet, the same road where she'd found Mia. Up ahead, she saw a flicker. A car stalled, hazard lights blinking weakly, a man in a thin jacket waving for help, his silhouette hunched against the wind. Clara pulled over, her nurse's instincts sharp as ever. "You okay?" she called, stepping into the snow, the cold biting her cheeks. He nodded, shivering, his teeth chattering. "Car's dead. Phone too." She grabbed a spare coat from the van, one of dozens donated to Nurses Haven, and tossed it to him, the fabric catching the glow of her headlights. "Can't think when you're freezing," she said with a grin, echoes of that night with Mia in her voice. She pulled a thermos from the passenger seat, pouring him a cup of lukewarm coffee, and they stood by the roadside, sipping in silence as snow dusted their shoulders. A tow truck rumbled up 20 minutes later, its yellow lights cutting through the dark. The man fished a crumpled 10 from his pocket, offering it with a shaky hand, but Clara waved it off. "Get home safe," she said, watching him climb into the tow cab. Back in the van, she smiled, the parka on her wall flashing in her mind. She'd come full circle, not just surviving, but passing on the kindness that had lifted her. Nurses Haven grew, 3 shelters in 2 years, 100 nurses back on their feet, their stories echoing Clara's own. She swept the shelter steps each morning with that broken broom, a quiet ritual tying her past to her present. Her act of kindness that snowy night hadn't just saved Mia. It had saved her too, igniting a chain that lifted countless others from the shadows. Clara's life proves true worth lies in how you treat people, not what you own. One small sacrifice can spark a miracle, turning loss into legacy. It's a reminder, do what's right, even when no one sees, and it might just change everything.
If you enjoyed the story, drop a like and subscribe for more tales like this. hit the bell, and we'll catch you in the next one.